What's up, everybody? It's your man, MG Marcus Grant. And are you looking to stay up to date with the latest goings-on of your favorite, or maybe not so favorite NFL team? Well, how do you do that? You go directly to the source. Every week, Matty Kroll is doing just that with On the Beat, talking to beat reporters from across the National Football League. Be sure to check it out each and every week.
Yo, what is going on, y'all? It's your boy, it's your host, Calvin Domingo, a.k.a. Steezy A. Smith, bringing you another episode of On Beat featuring the New York Giants. And today, as I like to call them, I got another VIG with me. And if you aren't already familiar with the term, then get with the program. I got a very important guest with me, and he covers the New York Giants for the New Jersey Advanced Media. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give him a round of applause, Mr. Zack Rosenblatt. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for taking the time to hop on. Before we get into the whole football side of things, I want to get to know you a little bit. And so I wanted to ask, you're a U of A alumni. You previously worked for the Tucson Star. Are you a native Arizonian?
No, I'm from New Jersey, but I went to University of Arizona for school and then stayed out there for work after that. And then I came back here to cover. First, I covered the Eagles, and now I'm covering the Giants.
Okay, so for the Tucson Star, you covered the Eagles.
No, I covered the University of Arizona football and basketball team for them. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So which, I guess, locale do you like more? I mean, I guess you're from New Jersey, but did you enjoy your time in Arizona?
Yeah, I loved it in Arizona. I don't know if I prefer either one or the other. I love them both, but the weather out in Arizona is way better than back here. That's for sure.
Right. Okay. And growing up, was being a sports writer, was that in the cards? Was that something you knew you were going to do?
Yeah, ever since I was younger, I would read. My parents would get me the subscriptions for all the sports magazines, and I would read the sports section every day. So even before I knew that I wanted to be a writer, I was already like reading sports writing all the time. So
right, okay, all right, gotcha. And now, before we get into football, one more question. So I saw on your Twitter feed that you said that Moon Knight was very disappointing, and I saw in your MCU TV rankings you actually put Moon Knight last, so 6 out of 6. And me personally, I love Moon Knight. I mean, I haven't had the chance to watch the season finale, but for me, I'd had to put it number one. So I got to ask you, what was the most disappointing?
I think I was being a little harsh, but I don't know. I just went in with such high expectations. I love Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke.
Yeah,
and the story just didn't grab me. The performances were all good, but yeah, I don't know. I just left feeling like not attached to the characters of the storyline. So it was well made, and I appreciated it, but I enjoyed. I thought Loki and WandaVision were like a step above all the other ones, and the others were just more entertaining to me, I think.
Gotcha. I just, for me, I found that very surprising, just because every single person I've asked about it, everyone's giving it all these rave reviews, and they're saying, oh, it's one of the best series of all time. And so just to hear that from me, it was something different. So I had to ask. But just because we'll talk about the MCU, have you had a chance to watch Doctor Strange?
I'm seeing it in a couple hours, I believe. So
you're seeing it later today?
Yeah, I couldn't wait anymore.
Oh my gosh! Oh man! All right. I'm about to watch it soon, so I can't wait.
I'm excited.
Okay, but now we're gonna move on to football. Thanks for those answers, by the way. You mentioned in the final sentence in your last story about Daniel Jones and his fifth-year option being declined that Jones will be gone, quote unquote, in 2023 if he fails to win games with the Giants and be a competitive football team with the Giants next year. So in your eyes, in your estimation, what will be considered a successful season for Daniel Jones as far as wins go? And with the state of the NFC in kind of in flux, at least in the bottom tier of things, and especially with the NFC East being wide open, do the Giants have a realistic shot at making the playoffs?
No, I don't think they do. I don't know if I would put a win total necessarily, because I don't know if Giants roster is really built to be a winner this year. I think the Eagles have kind of been loading up. The Cowboys still have a lot of talent. But for Jones, it mostly comes down to him having a productive season, which he hasn't had in a couple of years, not turning the ball over, taking shots downfield, and kind of just being the guy that they drafted him to be. And if he this is his last chance. He doesn't have a contract for next year. They declined his option. So this is his last chance to prove. And if he goes out there and proves that he's a guy they feel like they can win with, then they'll negotiate a contract with him. But if he plays like he has to this point, which, I think he's shown flashes and he hasn't had a great supporting cast. The offensive line has been terrible. Receivers always getting hurt. Guys dropping passes. So if his supporting cast is better, it'll finally just be on him to prove that it wasn't the supporting cast that was the issue. And I'm not very confident that he'll do that, but I think he has shown flashes of ability. So I'll be curious to see how he does with a better offensive line in front of him, at least, which I think they should have after all the moves they've made this offseason.
Which we will touch on in just a second. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about another guy who's kind of in a make or break situation and running back Saquon Barkley. And so with the Brian Daboll coming over from a pass heavy, Bills football team, how do you expect them to utilize a Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I think the fact that they didn't draft any running backs, which I thought they would have, and they only signed Matt Breida this offseason, who's more of like a, he's not going to push for that many carries, I don't think. So they're going to feature him pretty heavily. I think he's going to be used more as a receiver again, like he was as a rookie, which they kind of got away from. Ultimately, with him, it just comes down to staying healthy. If he can stay healthy and start showing some of that burst he showed his rookie year, then he can go into this offseason and get some money. I don't think that this regime is going to pay a running back a lot of money. So I don't know that this is probably his last year with the Giants, I would guess, unless he was willing to sign for a cheaper deal. But I don't see that because I think he values his brand and all that stuff. So I don't know. I think expectations should be high. He should get a lot of touches, a lot of chances to improve off what was a bad season for him last year. Played 13 games and couldn't even beat out Devontae Booker for stats. So he has a lot to prove. I think he's highly motivated. The talent is certainly there when he's healthy. He just hasn't been healthy. So if he stays healthy, like his numbers should be at least better than they have been the last few years.
Right. And I know these are just rumors, but I know before the draft, there was a lot of chatter about him potentially being traded. Do you know if that was actually close to ever happening during the draft, or was that all just a smokescreen?
No, not so much during the draft. I think in the offseason, I think they were willing to listen to offers, but I don't think they were going to get any that they felt were satisfactory. He's a running back coming off injuries, making $7 million this year. And he probably is more value to the Giants than necessarily would other teams. If he starts off the season really well and the Giants are losing, then I could see maybe a trade deadline type of thing where a team that's trying to make a run it feels like they're running back away. They view him as the piece. Like I could see that happening, but I would imagine he stays with them through this season.
Okay, gotcha. Well, obviously the draft happened last week, and so there's a whole lot to talk about there. The Giants are getting a whole bunch of rave reviews about their draft class. Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal were the top two players on a lot of boards, and they were able to get both of them with picks 5 and 7. So I want to ask you, what grade would you give the class overall, and which draft pick was the most surprising, and which draft pick was your favorite?
The overall grade I think I gave them was a B or a B minus. I think ultimately all that matters to me, at least, I think, is how good they did in the first round. They got arguably the two most talented guys, Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. And I think so you can come out of the draft feeling like you maybe added 2 cornerstone pieces, which they've needed for a long time, especially on the offensive line and as pass rushers. After that, I think they had a questionable pick in the second round, Wan'Dale Robinson, a 5'8" kind of gadget receiver. And I don't really understand the pick. I think they were looking for a certain type of player who can fill a role in a Bills type of offense because they had a lot of guys like that. And I don't think he's going to be a bad player necessarily, but I didn't really get the value there. And they had some other picks that like they drafted ahead of their perceived value, but that's all perception. So I think they filled a lot of their needs. They added a couple linebackers, guys that fit Wink Martindale's defense. The guard they drafted in the third round, Josh Azudu, I think he'll have a chance to start at left guard. But yeah, I think they traded back in the second round, which was a thing they never used to do 2 times. So they picked up extra picks, added 11 rookies. I would expect all of them to make the team and even play roles this year, which kind of tells you where the roster is. But I think it was overall a solid draft. First round was spectacular and couldn't have been better. Some other questionable picks, but overall, I think it was pretty good.
Well, speaking of Wan'Dale Robinson, does this mean that a Kadarius Toney trade is imminent?
No, I don't necessarily think. I think if somebody came in with a good offer, they would trade him. But I think they want to play it out. Maybe repair his value a little more. Get a chance to feature him in Brian Daboll's offense. I think Sterling Shepard's coming off an Achilles injury. I don't know when he'll be ready. I think they like Toney's skill set, though. I don't think they love his attitude. So a lot of it will be about him staying healthy and showing that he's committed to becoming a better player. And the talent is certainly there, I think. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they plan to use Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney, and Wan'Dale Robinson, who are all primarily slot receivers, I think. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Brian Daboll kind of utilizes his weapons.
Right. Okay. And so you mentioned Kadarius Toney and something about attitude. If there was ever any truth to those rumors about him wanting out or the Giants wanting to move on, was it strictly and only because of the attitude?
I mean, it's a combination. I think he hasn't really shown a very good commitment to football. I think there was a lot of red flags last year where he showed a lot of immaturity. And he has the health issues where he only played, I think, 11 games or something like that. And he barely practiced because he was always banged up. He missed almost all of training camp, missed all of the preseason. He skipped voluntary workouts this offseason, which was a red flag. He eventually came back after a lot of noise about that. But, there's a lot of voluntary OTAs and minicamp coming up. He can go out and prove himself to these new coaches. But I don't think he started off on the right foot necessarily, I would say.
Right. Okay. And I was really just asking for the sake of fantasy football because I did have him on the team last year, and I think he had 176 yards right in that game against the Dallas
Yeah,
Cowboys.
189 yards against the Cowboys.
One-
Well, that's the thing, that he has the tantalizing talent. He had that game the week before. He played well against the Saints. I think he had like 7 catches for 80 yards or something like that. Like, the talent is there. He didn't score any touchdowns. He needs to stay healthy. If he can get his head on straight, like he has very impressive talent and ability to like make guys miss that not a lot of guys coming into the league usually have. He still needs to refine his route running and stuff like that, but he's talented. But yeah, it comes down to availability and reliability for him.
1000% agreed. Okay, so with reinforcements on the offensive line, and obviously offensive tackle Evan Neal, you mentioned him, guard Joshua Izudu, I might be saying that wrong, and offensive guard Marcus McCawthon, I might be saying that wrong as well. Right. How confident are you in the Giants finally being able to protect Daniel Jones and open up lanes for Saquon Barkley?
So the bar is pretty low for their offensive line. It's arguably been the worst the last 2 years. It's been pretty bad for a decade. Andrew Thomas is a solid left tackle as long as he's healthy. I think Evan Neal will solidify right tackle. They signed Mark Lewinsky from the Colts. He's a veteran who has a lot of experience. He's going to play right guard. They signed John Feliciano from the Bills. He's going to play center for them. His career is at guard, but he's going to play center for them. And then, they're going to have a battle between guys like Josh Azudu. They signed Max Garcia. They signed Jameel Douglas. They have Shane Lemieux coming back. So they're going to have a big competition at left guard. But ultimately, as long as it's better and they can start to keep Daniel Jones on his feet, like, then everything else should open up around it. They just haven't had an offensive line they can rely on. So you saw the last 2 years with Joe Judge and Jason Garrett, they were like so scared of the offensive line and so scared of Daniel Jones turning it over that they were very conservative and not taking shots down the field. And I think they'll take more shots down the field this year at the very least.
Gotcha. Would you say the Giants have the most improved offensive line out of all the teams in the NFL during this offseason?
I haven't really dug into it enough to declare them like the most improved, but they're certainly on paper. It looks like it'll be a lot better. You need to see it in action. There's no guarantee. There's still, like, Andrew Thomas is the only one I feel 100% confident is going to be really good this year. I feel pretty good about Evan Neal, but you never know with the rookie. So I think there's still questions, but it should be a lot better because it was pretty disastrous last year, especially at right tackle and on the interior. So
I think that's fair. It's kind of hard to get worse than when you're already the worst, right?
Yeah.
And so you'd have to imagine that they'll get a little better, even if only marginally. But I want to talk about Kenny Golladay, the $72 million man. Last year, he played 14 games, finished with under 40 receptions, finished with under 600 yards, had 0 touchdowns. And so what went wrong?
Yeah, it was they didn't really utilize him to his skills. I think he was banged up a bunch. His thing is that he's great at down the field contested catch. He's not going to beat anybody with his speed because he's not that fast. But he's a guy that can get contested catches. You use him in the red zone, use his size, use his athleticism. He can make acrobatic catches. Jason Garrett was just not using him in that way. And he's a guy that when he gets frustrated, I think his effort level goes down a little bit. And he wasn't really winning a lot of his one-on-one matchups. So I think a lot of it's on him, certainly. But I don't think the coaching staff really knew what to do with him. And this is going to be a prove-it year for him, too. If he has a bad year, they'll get rid of him because that contract is huge. You overpaid him even in the moment. It seemed like that because they didn't have really competition for him. But they need him to be a number one receiver, and I think he has the talent to do it. But if they are losing and they're not getting the ball, like, I could see it happening like it did last year again.
Okay. And then one more question, football-wise at least. So with the plethora of wide receivers for Daniel Jones to throw to, obviously Kenny Golladay, like we talked about, Sterling Shepard whenever he comes back, Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson, amongst other depth options. Which pass catcher out of all those guys that I listed should fantasy footballers target in drafts?
Oh man, that's a tough question because these guys are all so banged up. In terms of like potential, I got probably Kadarius Toney. I would say has the highest ceiling of all of them. if Sterling Shepard is back by week 1, which I don't know that he will be, like he's like a PPR type of guy. He always he has health issues. Whenever he plays, he's heavily targeted. I would say Golladay is maybe the safest, which is a scary proposition because I don't think he's particularly safe. Like I would generally avoid these receivers at the beginning of the season, but Kadarius Toney, talent wise and potential, and if they keep him, is probably has the highest ceiling of like being a good guy that you can start by midseason or whatever.
Or do you play fantasy football yourself?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so just a side question. Would you draft Saquon Barkley in the first round?
In the first round, no, I would not draft in the first round. I do think, you probably can get, because with how last season went and his injury history, I'm curious to see where he goes in drafts. You might be able to go, if you can fall to the second or third round, that might be a good value for a guy that should bounce back and be better than last year. Can't really get much worse, but I wouldn't use a first, especially with how there's a lot more running backs that are pretty quality these days. I feel like a lot of guys that can catch passes. So I would not use a first round pick on him would be my recommendation.
Understandable. I got you. So one final question before we wrap things up. Do you have a favorite story or a favorite player that you've covered in your time as a sports writer / reporter?
Favorite player I've covered? Man, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of a good story for you. So I'll say I've covered Nick Foles for a long time, like dating back to when he was in college, actually, because he went to the University of Arizona. So kind of seeing him go along his journey, and then when he got to the Eagles and after he won the Super Bowl, I was able to write some stories about him. Just like being able to be there from the ground floor for a guy who, went through what he did in the NFL, was cut and benched and wound up on the Eagles, and they thought they were done when he went in, and then he won them the Super Bowl. And so getting to write about him, I would say, was one of the more cool experiences in my career, I would say. But there's been a lot, there's been some guys, on the Giants that I've written about, like Darnay Holmes has a cool background. And I wrote about Evan Neal pretty recently. That was cool. But yeah, there a lot of these guys have interesting stories, and I try to tell them the best I can.
Right. I mean, Nick Foles, to have been able to be there for his journey, that's wow. I can only imagine. He just got released, though. Do you see him sign with the team?
Yeah, he'll sign. He'll be a good backup for somebody. I don't know who, but he'll sign somewhere. Yeah.
So I'm a Seattle guy, so I'm hoping maybe he comes along here as a depth piece or something like that.
Competition for Drew Lock, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's gonna need it, right? But Zack Rosenblatt, thank you so much for taking the time. If you have any plugs, any last words you want to give out to the people before we go?
You can just follow me on Twitter at Zack Blatt, ZackBlatt. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for being on. Again, you guys are tuning in to another edition of On Beat featuring the New York Giants with the Mr. Zack Rosenblatt himself via the 32-Bit Network. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.